History is more than just dates and names in dusty books. It's a shadow stretching across time, full of secrets, tragedies, and whispers that refuse to die. This is Morbid History with Thomas Gloom. Rancho Santa Fe, California, March 1997. The house was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that brings peace. It was the stillness of ritual. Inside, a small group shuffled in soft, synchronized steps. Bare feet brushed against vacuumed carpet. In the living room, the television murmured, news of the Hale-Bopp comet looping over and over, its tail cutting a silver arc across the night sky. One by one, the followers of Heaven's Gate moved like shadows into the kitchen. They spoke in whispers, if at all. Their movements were practiced, deliberate. A woman in her 40s clutched a paper cup in her hands, the faint smell of vodka and bitterness rising from the purple liquid inside. She met the eyes of a man across the counter. His head was shaved, his face calm, almost serene. He gave the smallest nod. "It's time," someone said. She drank. A few sips. A careful swallow. Then another. When it was done, she lay on her bunk bed, black sweats, new Nikes, and a purple shroud draped gently over her face. Around her, 38 other crew members prepared to board the ship they believed was waiting. They were convinced that the comet blazing in the night sky wasn't just ice and dust. It was their ride to the next level of existence. A spacecraft hidden in the tail of the heavens. No fear, no screams, just a quiet surrender to the promise that death was only a doorway. By the end of the week, 39 bodies would be found, and the world would wake to the eerie calm of one of the largest mass suicides in American history. To most of the world, Rancho Santa Fe, California, was just another quiet suburban community, sun-washed, peaceful, and hidden behind gates and palm-lined streets. But in March 1997, a mansion there became the stage for one of the most surreal and chilling events in modern American history. 39 people, men and women, were found dead in their bunks, faces covered with purple shrouds, dressed identically in black shirts, black sweats, and the now infamous Nike Decade sneakers. They were members of Heaven's Gate, and they believed they had just boarded a spaceship. The origins of a cult. The roots of Heaven's Gate stretch back to the early 1970s, when two unlikely figures met in a Houston hospital. Marshall Applewhite, a music professor with a bright smile and a fragile mind. Bonnie Nettles, a nurse with a fascination for theosophy and prophecy. They became, quote-unquote, the Two, a mystical duo who believed they were chosen to lead a select group of humans to a higher level of existence. They called themselves Bo and Peep at first, and later T and Do, drawing inspiration from the sound of music's Do, Re, Mi, as they created a new spiritual lexicon. Their pitch was as strange as it was seductive. Earth was about to be quote-unquote recycled. Human bodies were mere vehicles for the soul, and only those who abandoned their worldly attachments, family, sex, money, and ego, could transcend to the quote-unquote next level, leaving their human shells behind. Marshall Applewhite once said, "The only chance to survive or evacuate this earth is to leave with us." To outsiders, it sounded absurd. But to seekers, drifting in the spiritual chaos of the 1970s, it was a lifeline. A promise that they were special, chosen, and destined for something greater. Life in Heaven's Gate. By the 1980s and 90s, Heaven's Gate had retreated from public proselytizing to a quiet, highly regimented communal life. Their rules were strict: absolute celibacy, no alcohol, smoking, or indulgence of any kind. All possessions and individuality were to be completely surrendered. Haircuts were identical. Names were replaced with coded monikers ending in Odie. Like, instead of Sawyer and Mary, you'd have Sawyer Odie or Mary Odie. Their days were filled with meditation, study, and computer work to fund their mission. They even ran a small web design business called Higher Source, one of the first of its kind. And at the center of it all was Do, aka Marshall Applewhite, who by now was the sole leader after T, aka Bonnie Nettles' death in 1985. Her passing was a critical turning point. She had been the spiritual anchor of the group, and Applewhite reframed her death as an, quote, exit to the next level, unquote, cementing the idea that leaving the human body was the ultimate goal. A former cult member said, quote, "We believed he was the shepherd. He would guide us to safety. And when T left her body, we believed she had simply gone ahead to prepare the way," unquote. The cult's doctrine intensified. Members believed that UFOs were vessels of salvation, and that the end of Earth, or its recycling, was imminent. Hale-Bopp and the Final Plan. In 1997, the appearance of Comet Hale-Bopp electrified Heaven's Gate. Astronomers and skywatchers marveled at the comet's long, luminous tail. To Applewhite, it was a sign, the very sign they'd been waiting for. When an amateur astronomer speculated, falsely I might add, that an object might be trailing the comet, Applewhite seized on it as proof of his prophecy. His proclamation was that the spaceship had arrived. Heaven's Gate called their departure the exit, or graduation. They would shed their human vehicles and ascend to the next level to join T in the heavens. In Applewhite's farewell video, which you can still view online, he said, "We do, in all honesty, hate this world. We are ready to leave it." The final days. In their rented mansion and Rancho Santa Fe, the group meticulously prepared. Their final days were a combination of ritual, domesticity, and eerie calm. They recorded farewell videos, smiling and serene, each member affirming their excitement to quote-unquote graduate. They shaved their heads and donned their matching uniforms. They cooked the same meals together, including the infamous Last Supper of turkey pot pie. On March 22nd, 1997, the first group of 15 took the lethal mixture. Phenobarbital, mixed into applesauce and washed down with vodka, followed by plastic bags over their heads to ensure death. Another 15 followed the next day. Then, the final 9, including Applewhite himself. When police entered the mansion days later, they found the bodies carefully arranged on bunk beds, faces covered in purple shrouds. The air was still. No chaos, no signs of struggle. Just the quiet aftermath of complete and unwavering belief. Public reaction. News of the mass suicide spread rapidly, and the images became instantly iconic. Black sweats, Nikes, and purple cloths. Nike discontinued the Decades shoes after the incident, but this led to them being highly sought after and auctioned for high resale prices, sparking a mix of horror and morbid fascination. Late-night hosts made jokes. Conspiracy theorists had a field day. But beneath the memes and media circus, the tragedy was profound. 39 people died for a promise of salvation that existed only in Marshall Applewhite's twisted mind. The chilling psychology. Heaven's Gate wasn't a violent cult. They didn't murder outsiders or wage war on the world. Instead, they turned their devotion inward, fanning it into a self-consuming flame. Applewhite's genius, if you could call it that, was in his ability to erase doubt. He gave his followers a narrative that made death feel like purpose. In their eyes, they weren't ending their lives. They were merely completing a mission. A surviving ex-member reflected the following years after the tragedy. They were good people, smart people. They just believed, and they believed all the way to the end. Legacy. Today, Heaven's Gate lives on in strange ways. Their website is still active, maintained by surviving loyalists. The phrase, "drink the Kool-Aid," has a 1990s sibling, catching the comet. And their story remains a cautionary tale of how charisma, isolation, and apocalyptic belief can lead to tragedy. What makes the Heaven's Gate cult uniquely chilling is not just the mass death. It's the calmness of it all. No gunfights, no screams, no whispers of sexual abuse. Just a group of seemingly ordinary people waiting for a spacecraft in the sky and stepping into death with quiet conviction. Greetings, dear listeners. Thomas Gloom here. I'm stopping by to share two brief things. One, if you are enjoying this podcast, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And also, leave a review. Whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else, leaving reviews helps to promote this podcast and get it before new potential listeners. Let's grow this thing together. Also, depending on where you listen, you might be able to leave comments on episodes. I would encourage you to do that. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm open to feedback. The second thing is that I have been active on TikTok. I'm posting 2 videos a day and plan to do so into the future. So search out Morbid History Pod. The profile image is the same as the podcast logo. Find me there. Back to the show. All that said, history reveals that many cults had darker, deadlier, and more dastardly plans laid out not just for their followers, but for anybody else that got in their way. The People's Temple and the Jonestown Massacre, 1978, Guyana. Jim Jones promised paradise in the jungle, but it ended in poison and death. Over 900 members of the People's Temple died after drinking cyanide-laced Flavor Aid, many while under duress. But before this final event took place, the members were subjected to forced labor, public punishments, and constant surveillance. Jones was increasingly paranoid, using drugs heavily, and feared government intervention. Family members in the U.S. pressured authorities to investigate alleged human rights abuses and forced detainment of cult members. This led to Congressman Leo Ryan traveling to Guyana with journalists and conserved relatives to investigate Jonestown. After recognizing some of the abuses taking place, the congressman tried to take some cult members back to the U.S. with him, which led to a showdown on an airstrip. Gunfire erupted, leaving 5 people dead, including Congressman Ryan, 3 journalists, and 1 defector. Back at the compound, the eerie death tape recorded Jones calmly instructing his flock to quote-unquote die with dignity, while the sounds of children crying echoed in the background. Children were killed first, and adults followed, many forcibly injected if they resisted. Jim Jones himself died of a gunshot wound to the head, likely self-inflicted or at least assisted. Jonestown remains one of the largest mass deaths in modern history, and a chilling symbol of blind devotion. The Branch Davidians and the Waco Siege, 1993, Texas. David Koresh's apocalyptic sect believed he was the Lamb of God, with the power to open the 7 seals of Revelation. U.S. authorities accused them of stockpiling illegal weapons and suspected child abuse within the compound, which led to a 51-day standoff with federal agents. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, attempted to serve a search warrant and arrest Koresh, but a massive gun battle broke out. The failed raid led to 10 deaths in a standoff with the FBI taking over operations. Beginning on February 28th, the FBI engaged in negotiations, successfully releasing some children. They also used psychological pressure tactics such as floodlights, loud music, and sounds to deprive the Branch Davidian members of sleep. Koresh delayed surrender, claiming God told him to wait for a divine sign. After a standoff of nearly 2 months, a massive fire broke out inside the compound. The cause of the deadly flames is still debated to this day. The FBI claims Davidians set it intentionally, while surviving members state it was caused by the actions of federal agents. When all was said and done, 76 people were dead, including Koresh, women, and 25 children. The world watched on live TV as a religious compound became a smoldering graveyard. The siege remains one of the most controversial law enforcement operations in United States history, and directly led to anti-government sentiment, influencing events like the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. The movement for the restoration of the Ten Commandments of God. 2000. Uganda. This group preached strict obedience to the Ten Commandments to avoid the end of the world. Members were forbidden to speak, have sex, or even use soap, believing extreme purity would bring salvation. But cult leaders soon predicted the world would end on New Year's Day of the year 2000. When the prophecy failed, leaders lured over 500 members into a church, boarded it up, and then set it ablaze, killing everyone inside. Mass graves were later discovered by authorities at the cult's compound, bringing the total number of dead to almost 800. This makes it one of the deadliest cult tragedies in history, and one of the least known. The Children of God, 1960s through the 1970s, worldwide. This free love Christian movement promised salvation through love and evangelism, but its leader, David Berg, led it into darkness. The group became infamous for sexual abuse, including children, and quote-unquote flirty fishing, where women were used to recruit men into the cult. Children were often raised communally, with little contact to the outside world. Survivors carry deep trauma, and the group, now called the Family International, still exists in a diminished form and officially renounced abusive practices, but its dark legacy persists. The Anthill Kids, 1970s through 1980s, Canada. Led by self-proclaimed prophet Roch Thériault, this tiny commune in rural Canada descended into torture and murder. Members lived in an isolated commune and were nicknamed the Anthill Kids because Thériault forced them to work tirelessly like ants on perfecting their survival tactics. Thériault imposed absolute control, mutilating and abusing his followers under the guise of spiritual purification. He became increasingly violent and sadistic, committing physical and sexual abuse, including on children. He performed crude, deadly surgeries on followers without anesthesia, sometimes resulting in death. By the time he was arrested, multiple followers had died horrific deaths in what is now remembered as one of Canada's most shocking cult cases. Roch Thériault died in prison in 2011. Om Shinrikyo, 1995, Japan. Founded by Shoko Asahara, this doomsday cult mixed Buddhist and Hindu teachings with apocalyptic Christian visions and paranoia. The cult members included numerous affluent and skilled professionals, such as scientists and academics, giving the group access to advanced technology and labs. Believing the end of the world was near, they launched a sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway, killing 13 people and injuring thousands. Asahara and senior members were arrested, tried, and eventually executed in 2018. The cult was rebranded as Aleph and is still under government surveillance in Japan and Russia. Om Shinrikyo showed how religious fanaticism can evolve from spiritual obsession into outright terrorism. The snow fell softly over a small Swiss village in October 1994, muffling the world in white. The villagers awoke to an acrid smell. Smoke. Something burning. It rose from the isolated farmstead where the Order of the Solar Temple had held its last meeting. By the time authorities entered the property, the scene was something out of a nightmare. Dozens of bodies, 23 in total, were found arranged in a circle, heads toward the center, many wearing ceremonial robes. Some were shot in the head. Others had been drugged. Candles still burned. A star-shaped altar stood nearby. The house had been set on fire deliberately. The message was clear. This was no accident. It was a ritual. And it was only the beginning. Origins of the Order. The Order of the Solar Temple emerged in the 1980s, born from a strange marriage of mysticism, apocalypse prophecy, and money. Its founders were Joseph D. Mombro, a charismatic Frenchman with a flair for ceremony and an obsession with secrecy. Luc Jouret, a homeopathic doctor and passionate lecturer on New Age spirituality and the coming apocalypse. They promised their followers something intoxicating, a secret society linking back to the Knights Templar, the legendary medieval order. The Solar Temple claimed to be a spiritual successor to the Templars, guarding cosmic truths and preparing its members for a coming transformation. The group taught that the Earth was doomed, destined for environmental and spiritual collapse. True believers could escape the corruption of this world by transcending to a higher plane of existence, sometimes referred to as, quote, the transit, unquote. And they had a destination in mind. The star, Sirius. To leave Earth, members would first need to leave their bodies. Life in the Solar Temple. Members were drawn from the wealthy and educated, doctors, professionals, and those searching for purpose in the murky waters of late 20th century spirituality. Behind closed doors, the order operated like a secret fraternity. Elaborate initiation rituals involving candles, swords, and robes. Esoteric teachings, mixing Christianity, astrology, and doomsday warnings. Plus, heavy financial contributions to the leaders. D. Mombro orchestrated mystical theatrics to maintain control. He used hidden projectors and trapdoors to create the illusion of miraculous events, like ghostly figures appearing during rituals. Members were told their children were holy beings, or even cosmic emissaries. But devotion came with a price. Complete obedience, total financial surrender, and eventually, the ultimate sacrifice. A paraphrased testimony from a survivor went like this. We were told this world was corrupted beyond saving. Leaving it wasn't death. It was a passage to light. October 1994. The first mass death. The first wave of transits shocked Europe. In Cherie, Switzerland, 23 bodies were found in the farmhouse, some in a ceremonial circle, others in hidden rooms. Some were shot or smothered before the fire consumed the home. Meanwhile, in another Swiss village, 25 more bodies were discovered across 2 chalets. They were arranged in similar fashion, in what investigators described as ritualized groupings, like a macabre tableau. Some of the dead were children. The total count, 48 dead in one night. March 1995. The fire in France. Only months later, fire once again lit the night sky, this time in a mountainous region in France. Police discovered 16 more victims, including several children, in a remote alpine home. The pattern repeated: ritual circles, drugged members, gunshots, and fire. The killings were deliberate, organized, and staged to look like voluntary exits to the next level. Forensic evidence told a darker truth. Many victims were drugged first, then shot or suffocated. The fires were set on timers or by surviving members who later killed themselves. Some victims showed signs of struggling. This wasn't collective enlightenment. It was murder. March 1997. The final sacrifice. In March 1997, just days after the Heaven's Gate suicides in California, the Solar Temple struck for the last time. This time, 5 members, including a family of 3 with a young child, were found dead in Quebec, Canada, in a house deliberately set on fire. Investigators concluded that the killings were staged as yet another ritual transit, echoing the pattern that had unfolded across 3 countries. The pattern and the psychology. Across Switzerland, France, and Canada, the Order of the Solar Temple left 74 dead in total. They were affluent, educated. From the outside, they had no reason to follow a man into fire. So why did they? The Solar Temple offered something deceptively simple: certainty. It promised cosmic meaning in an uncertain world. It offered a narrative in which death wasn't the end. It was a ticket to salvation. And under Di Mambro and Jaret, doubt became sin, and sin became fatal. André Pillerm, the Swiss prosecutor of the case, said, quote, "This was not mass suicide. It was manipulation and murder, disguised as faith." Unquote. Even in death, the cult performed for its own mythology. Bodies arranged as if enacting a final ceremony, faces toward the heavens they would never see. Legacy. The Order of the Solar Temple now lives in infamy alongside Jonestown and Heaven's Gate. But its horrors lie in its quiet precision. Timed fires, staged tableau of the dead, victims who may never have known they were about to transit. It was ritual death not as an act of frenzy, but as choreographed annihilation. And like so many cults, it began not with fire, but with a whisper, promising enlightenment. Faith can be a lantern in the dark. It can comfort, guide, and give us purpose when the world feels cold and senseless. But faith without question, faith stripped of doubt, can become something else entirely. In the hands of a false prophet, it becomes a weapon, It demands obedience, isolation, sacrifice, and sometimes blood. From Jonestown's jungle to Hale-Bop's shadow, from the ritual fires of the solar temple to the child abuse hidden behind hymns, history whispers a warning. The human hunger for meaning is powerful, and when it's starved, we will follow almost anyone who promises to feed it. The problem is, sometimes, that meal is poison. This has been Morbid History. I'm your host, Thomas Gloom. Thank you for taking this brief journey with me. If you enjoyed this little audio excursion, then please leave a review wherever you listen. And come follow me on TikTok, where I consistently post all kinds of dark happenings and true crime mysteries. And remember, the next time someone promises salvation, asks for everything you own, and tells you to leave your family behind, maybe don't drink what they're serving. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, history can be a lot of things, including morbid.